chosen one. Stop scrolling, this wasn't meant to reach you like this. There was a moment earlier you almost caught it, but it slipped. And now something about this feels off, doesn't it? No, don't brush it away this time, because what you missed didn't disappear. It waited. Something has been building quietly around you, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to make things feel slightly misaligned. Conversations that felt unfinished, plans that almost worked, emotions that didn't match the moment. You noticed it, just not fully, and that's where it started. Listen. There's a reason things didn't move when you expected them to, a reason certain doors stayed closed even when you were ready. You thought it was delay, maybe even rejection. But what if it wasn't? What if something was holding you back on purpose, not to stop you, but to stop something from reaching you too early? Because you weren't just being slowed down, you were being watched over in a way that didn't make sense yet. Wait. Think about the last time you felt like giving up, not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like you were done trying. Why did that moment feel heavier than the others? Why did it linger longer than it should have? Because something shifted right there, and you didn't see it. Not because you couldn't, because it wasn't time. There's something deeper happening, and it's uncomfortable to admit this, but part of you kept ignoring it. You kept choosing logic over instinct. You kept trying to force clarity when something inside you was asking you to pause. And now here you are again, right on the edge of seeing it, but still not fully. You keep asking why things feel delayed, why the answers don't come when you need them, why something feels almost revealed but never completely. And the truth is, you weren't supposed to understand it all at once, because if you did, it would change everything too fast. It would force you to see how much has already been rearranged behind the scenes, how certain people were moved out of your path, how certain outcomes were quietly rewritten. And yeah, that sounds unreal. But then explain this. Why did something that should have worked suddenly fall apart at the last second? Why did you feel pulled away from something you once wanted so badly? Why did that one moment stay in your mind like it meant more than it showed? You can't explain it logically, and that's exactly the point. Because this wasn't logic, this was intervention. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. You almost missed it completely. You almost kept moving like nothing was happening, like everything was random, like those small disruptions didn't matter. But they did. They were signals. Not loud enough to scare you, just enough to redirect you. And now, right now, you're starting to feel the weight of that realization. It's subtle, but it's there. Something is unfolding, and you're not outside of it. You're in the middle of it. Even this moment isn't random. Even this feeling, this slight tension in your chest, this quiet awareness that something is different, it's part of it. But let me say something that might not sit well. You're still resisting it. Not fully, not consciously, but enough. Because seeing it clearly would mean admitting that things didn't go wrong. They were redirected. And that changes how you see everything. Your past, your choices, even your pain. It stops being meaningless and starts becoming intentional. That's why it's been hidden from you. Not forever, just until now. Because now, you're ready to at least begin seeing it. Not all of it, just enough. Enough to realize that what you thought was silence wasn't silence. What you thought was distance wasn't distance. It was something holding back, waiting for you to catch up to what was already being done for you. And yeah, it sounds strange, but so does everything that's real before you fully understand it. So don't rush to explain this. Don't try to label it. Just notice something has been trying to get your attention, gently, repeatedly, patiently, and you're finally starting to notice it. Not clearly, not completely, but enough to know you didn't just find this. This found you. And whatever you almost saw before, you're about to see it again. This time, don't look away. Sometimes the silence feels heavier than the pain, like something deeper is trying to reach you. Comment Amen if something inside you is starting to wake up. Stay connected with Born into Light, only if this message feels like it was meant for you. Because the moment you usually turn away, that's where it starts getting real. You've done it before. Right when something felt too precise, too aligned, you distracted yourself. Why? Not fear exactly, something closer to recognition. Like you almost remembered something you were never supposed to forget. And that's the part that keeps slipping. It wasn't just events around you shifting, it was you. Subtly, quietly. Almost like pieces of you were being moved into place without your permission, without your awareness. And you felt it, in the pauses between things, in the silence after certain conversations, in that strange moment when everything looked normal but didn't feel it. That wasn't random. But here's where it turns. What if it wasn't just happening for you? What if part of this required you to notice it to continue, because something paused the moment you ignored it? Not everything, just enough to keep you circling the same point without realizing why. You called it confusion, but it wasn't confusion, it was interruption. A quiet one, placed exactly where you would least expect it, and you kept stepping over it. But now you didn't. Something held your attention just a second longer this time. Why did it feel heavier than before? Why did it feel like if you missed it again, something would close, not permanently, just long enough? Listen carefully. There's a pattern you haven't fully seen yet. Not in what happened, in what almost happened. Moments that nearly aligned, words that were almost said, decisions that almost locked in. Why does everything feel like it stopped just before something important? That's not delay. That's precision. And it's uncomfortable to admit this, but you weren't ready for what came after those moments, so something kept you just outside of it, close enough to feel it, not close enough to enter it. And now you're starting to feel that edge again. Right now. It's subtle, but it's sharper than before. Like something is waiting for you to step differently this time. But here's the contradiction. You keep thinking you need more clarity before you move. But clarity isn't what unlocks this. Attention does. The kind you've been avoiding. The kind that makes everything slow down for a second and forces you to actually see. So, let me ask you something. What was the last moment today that felt slightly out of place? Not big, not dramatic, just off. Why did that stay with you longer than it should have? That's where it is. Not the answer. The entrance. And you've been walking past it because it doesn't look important enough. But that's the design. It hides inside ordinary moments so you don't force it, so you don't rush it, so you don't control it. Because the second you try to control it, it disappears again. You've seen that happen. Things felt close, then suddenly distant. Clear, then confusing, like something pulled back right when you reached for it. That wasn't punishment. That was protection from premature understanding. Yeah, that sounds strange. But think, what would happen if you suddenly saw everything clearly right now? You wouldn't trust it. You'd question it. Maybe even reject it. So instead, it reveals itself in fragments, in almost moments, in things that don't fully make sense until later. And you're inside one of those fragments right now. But this one is different, because you're not rushing past it. You're still here, still listening, still noticing. And something is responding to that. Not loudly, not visibly, but something shifted the second your attention stayed. You felt it, didn't you? No, not fully, but enough to make you pause again. Enough to make this feel less like coincidence and more like something is timing itself around you. And that's where it gets deeper. Because if it's timing itself around you, then it's been aware of you this entire time. Not watching in the way you think. More like adjusting, repositioning, waiting for you to reach a point where you wouldn't look away. And you're closer to that point than you realize. But don't rush this part, because the next shift, it doesn't come from trying harder. It comes from seeing what you've been skipping. And once you see that, even slightly, things won't feel the same anymore. Not because everything changes instantly, but because you will. And that's when the pattern stops repeating. Not completely, just enough for you to notice there was never a loop. Only a delay until you were finally ready to see what was always there. And the strange part is, it didn't arrive. It was already in front of you. You just kept expecting it to look different. Bigger, clearer, undeniable. But it never works like that. It shows up quietly, almost easy to dismiss. Like that moment, you remember it now, don't you? It didn't feel important at the time, but something about it stayed. Why did it stay? Not the whole memory, just a piece of it, a detail that doesn't let go. That's where it's hiding. Not in the obvious parts, in what didn't make sense. And you've been trying to fix that feeling instead of following it. That's why it kept fading, because you kept correcting it, labeling it, explaining it away before it could expand. But this time, it didn't disappear as quickly. Why? What changed this time? You didn't rush. You paused just long enough for something to respond, not visibly. But you felt the shift, a slight pressure, almost like being pulled inward, not forward. Inward. That's new. Because this was never about chasing something outside. It's been circling inside your awareness this whole time, and every time you looked outward for answers, it went quiet again. Not gone, just waiting. But here's where it turns again. You think you're getting closer to understanding it. But understanding isn't the next step. Recognition is, and they're not the same. Understanding tries to explain. Recognition just knows. No proof, no logic, just that quiet certainty that makes everything else feel secondary. You've touched that feeling before. Briefly then doubted it. Why did you doubt it so quickly? Because it didn't match what you expected truth to feel like. You expected clarity. Instead it felt unfamiliar, almost too simple. So you stepped back. And the moment closed, not because you lost it, because you questioned it. But now you're not stepping back the same way. There's hesitation, yes, but there's also something else. A pull that wasn't there before. Subtle but persistent. Like something is waiting for your permission, not to enter, to reveal. And you haven't given that permission yet. Not fully. Because part of you is still holding on to the need to figure it out. But what if figuring it out is what keeps delaying it? What if the more you try to solve it, the further it stays just out of reach? That's the contradiction. You get closer by stopping the search, and that doesn't make sense. But neither did everything else that brought you here. So stay with this. Don't move past this moment too quickly. Because this is usually where you disconnect. Where you scroll, where you shift your attention before it deepens. But you haven't done that yet. You're still here, and something is noticing that. Again, not in the way you think. More like alignment. Like two things that were slightly out of sync are starting to match. And when that happens, things open. Not all at once. Just enough. Enough for you to catch the next piece. But it won't come the way you expect. It never has. It'll come through something small, something easy to overlook, maybe even something you almost ignore. But this time you won't, because now you know where to look. Not outward, not for answers, for the shift. That quiet moment where everything pauses just slightly and something feels different for no clear reason. That's it. That's always been it. And the next time it happens, you'll feel it stronger, clearer, not fully explained, but undeniable. And when that moment arrives, you'll understand why everything had to stay just out of reach. Not to keep it from you, but to make sure, when you finally saw it, you wouldn't question it again. And that's the part you're not ready for, because something in you still wants to. Not out of doubt, out of habit. You've been trained to second-guess what feels real the moment it gets too close. So even now, there's a small part of you preparing to pull back. You feel it, that hesitation right before something clicks. Why does it always happen there? Why right at the edge? Because that edge isn't where things end. It's where something begins to reveal itself, and you decide whether to meet it or retreat. And most times, you've retreated without noticing. Not dramatically, just enough to lose the thread. But this time, you're still holding it. Barely. And that's enough, because now something is starting to press forward from the other side. Not forcefully, almost carefully. Like it knows if it moves too fast, you'll close again. So it's matching your pace. Step for step. Pause for pause. Have you noticed that? Things are slowing down around this moment. Even your thoughts feel slightly spaced. That's not distraction. That's space being made for something you haven't let fully form yet. And here's the uncomfortable shift. What if it's not trying to show you something new? What if it's trying to remind you of something you already know? Something you buried because it didn't fit the version of reality you were told to trust? That would explain the familiarity, that strange feeling of, I felt this before, but I don't know where. You do know, just not consciously. And every time it comes close to the surface, you interrupt it. Not intentionally, but automatically. Because remembering it would change how you see everything. Your past wouldn't look the same. Your mistakes wouldn't feel like mistakes. Even the moments you thought you lost something would start to feel like something else entirely. And that's a lot to face all at once. So instead, it reveals itself in fragments. But here's the contradiction. You've been waiting for a sign while quietly ignoring the ones already given. Not because you didn't see them, but because they didn't look how you expected. That's why this kept repeating. Not the situation, the near recognition, the almost seeing, the feeling that something is right there, but just out of reach. But it's not out of reach, it's out of alignment. And alignment doesn't come from effort. It comes from allowing something you've been resisting. So let me ask you, what have you been subtly pushing away even though it keeps returning? Not loudly, just enough to keep it from settling. That's not random. That's the exact point of entry. And you've been guarding it without realizing. But something changed. You didn't block it this time. You didn't fully accept it either, but you didn't shut it down. And that small difference, that hesitation instead of rejection, that's what opened this. That's why this feels different now. Heavier but clearer. Closer but still unfolding. Because now, it's not just brushing against your awareness. It's starting to move through it, slowly, carefully, but unmistakably. And here's where it deepens. You think you're approaching the moment of understanding, but the truth is, you're approaching the moment of recognizing what's already been guiding you, and that changes everything. Because if it's been guiding you this whole time, then none of those off moments were accidents. None of those delays were empty. None of those shifts were without intention, which means something has been responding to you even when you didn't know how to respond back. And now you're starting to, not with words, not with actions, with attention. And that's what it was waiting for. Not belief, not certainty, just your attention, undivided, unrushed. And now that it has it, something is about to come into view, not all at once, just enough to make you stop again and realize this wasn't something you were searching for. It was something that's been trying to reach you again and again until you finally stayed long enough to let it. And the moment you do, it doesn't rush in. It waits. Almost like it's checking if you'll close again. You feel that pause. That silence that suddenly feels full. Why does it feel like something is right there, but not stepping forward yet? Because this part isn't about being shown. It's about you allowing yourself to see without forcing it. And that's harder than it sounds, because you're used to chasing clarity. This isn't clarity, it's presence. And presence feels unfamiliar when you've spent so long trying to figure things out, so your mind starts to move again, trying to label it, define it, break it into something safe. But if you do that now, it fades. You've seen that happen. The moment you try to control it, it slips back into the background. So don't. Just stay here a second longer, right in this strange stillness. Because something is forming not outside, inside your awareness. And it's not new. That's the unsettling part. It's something you've known, just never held on to long enough. Why does it feel familiar and unfamiliar at the same time? Because it was always there, just covered, layered, softened until it became easy to ignore. But now those layers are thinning, not all at once, just enough for you to notice the outline. And that outline, it connects to everything you thought didn't make sense. Those moments you almost mentioned to someone, but didn't. Those instincts you brushed aside but remembered later. Those quiet internal pulls that had no explanation, but felt accurate. They weren't random. They were incomplete signals, and now they're starting to align. But here's the shift. You keep thinking you're getting closer to an answer. You're not. You're getting closer to a decision. And that's different. Because once you see it clearly enough, you won't be able to pretend you didn't. And that's where most people step back. Not because it's scary, because it's undeniable. And denial has been your safety for a while now. Quiet, subtle denial. The kind that says, maybe later. The kind that delays what you already feel. But now, later isn't holding the same weight. You can feel that, can't you? Like something is gently removing your ability to ignore it. Not forcing you, just making it harder to look away. And here's the contradiction. You've been waiting for confirmation, but what's coming doesn't confirm anything. It reveals. And revelation doesn't ask for permission. It simply becomes visible, but only if you stay. Only if you don't rush past the moment it appears. Because it won't shout, it won't prove itself. It will just be there. And you'll recognize it. Not because it's obvious, but because something inside you will go quiet. Completely quiet. That kind of quiet you can't fake. That kind that doesn't need explanation. That's how you'll know. But you're not there yet. You're closer than before, but still on the edge. Still in that space where things almost make sense, but not fully. And that's intentional, because if it all connected right now, you'd skip the part that matters most. The part where you choose to stay present without needing answers. That's what changes everything, not what you see, but how long you're willing to stay with it. So stay. Even now there's something subtle happening. A shift in how you're taking this in. Slower, deeper, less reactive. Why? Because something in you is starting to trust this feeling, not fully, but enough to not run from it. And that's new. That's the opening. And once that opens even slightly, things don't go back to how they were. Not because everything changes instantly, but because you've crossed a point where pretending becomes harder, where ignoring it takes more effort than facing it. And you're almost there. One more moment like this, one more time where you don't look away, and it moves from almost seen to something you can't unsee. Not fully explained, not perfectly clear, but present enough to shift everything that comes next. And you can already feel the beginning of that shift, even if you can't explain what's changing. It's subtle, but something in you isn't reacting the same way anymore. Why? Why does this moment feel heavier, but also clearer? Because you're not just observing it now, you're inside it. There's no distance left. That's new. Before, you could step back, distract yourself, move on before it settled. But right now, that option feels weaker. Like something is quietly holding your attention in place. Not forcing, just not letting it slip as easily. And that's where it deepens. Because the more you stay here, the more something starts to take shape. Not visually, not logically, but you can feel the outline getting stronger, closer, like it's about to become something you can't ignore anymore. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Part of you doesn't want it to fully appear, not because it's bad, but because it's final. Once you see it, really see it, you lose the ability to go back to how you were. And that's the part you've been avoiding this whole time. Not the truth, the change that comes with it. So you've been hovering in this almost space, close enough to feel it, not close enough to let it transform you. But now that space is collapsing. You feel that sense that something is closing in, not in a threatening way, in a focusing way. Like everything unnecessary is being pushed out, so only this remains. And it's getting harder to ignore, harder to label, harder to escape. Why now? Why does it feel like this moment is different from all the others? Because this time you didn't just notice it, you stayed. Longer than usual, long enough for it to respond differently. And it did. You felt it shift, not dramatically, but enough to change the weight of this moment. And here's the contradiction. You thought you needed more time to understand this, but time was never the missing piece. Presence was. And now that you're here, fully here, something is no longer holding back the same way. It's still not rushing, but it's not hiding either. It's right at the edge of becoming clear. And that edge, it's thinner than you think. So thin that one more moment of attention, one more second of not looking away, and it crosses over. But what crosses over isn't information, it's realization. And realization doesn't feel like learning. It feels like remembering something you didn't know you knew. That's why it hits differently. That's why it feels deeper than explanation. Because it doesn't come from outside. It rises from within. And once it rises, you can't push it back down the same way. You've tried that before. It never fully works. It just delays it. And delay is running out. Not because something is forcing you, but because something is aligning too precisely now to be ignored. You can feel that alignment, can't you? Things that once felt scattered now feel like they're pointing somewhere. Not clearly, but consistently. And consistency, that's what breaks denial. That's what makes it undeniable. And you're right there, right at that point where everything starts to connect, not perfectly, but enough. Enough to make you stop questioning if this is real. Enough to make you feel this isn't something passing through you. This is something that's been waiting for you to reach it. And now you have. Not fully, but far enough. Far enough that turning away now would feel wrong. Different from before. Because now you'd know you're avoiding it. And that awareness, that's the point of no return. So stay, just a little longer. Because what's about to surface next, it won't ask for your attention. It will take it, quietly, completely. And when it does, you won't be wondering anymore. You'll just know. And when that knowing settles in, it won't feel loud. No sudden rush, no dramatic clarity. Just a quiet shift where everything you question stops needing answers. You'll notice it in the smallest way. The way your thoughts slow down, the way your chest feels lighter but heavier at the same time, because something finally clicked into place. Not perfectly, but enough to stop searching in the same way. And here's what changes. You won't chase what keeps moving away anymore. You won't force what keeps resisting you, because now you'll see those weren't losses, they were separations that had to happen. Not to break you, to redirect you before you stepped into something that wasn't meant to stay. And suddenly, things you once questioned will start to make a different kind of sense. Not logical sense, but aligned sense. The kind that doesn't need explanation. The kind that feels right, even if you can't prove it. And that's when the noise fades. Not completely, but enough for you to hear something else. Something that was always there, just buried under everything you kept trying to control. And now, you're not controlling it anymore. You're noticing it, trusting it, just a little. And that's all it needed. Because this was never about showing you everything. It was about bringing you to the point where you could finally see for yourself, not all at once, but enough to move differently. Enough to stop repeating what no longer belongs in your path. Enough to recognize you were never as lost as you thought. You were being guided in ways you couldn't see yet. And now, you don't need to see it all. You just need to stop ignoring what you already feel. That quiet pull, that subtle knowing. That moment where everything pauses and something inside you says, this matters, because it does, and this time you didn't look away. That's the difference. That's what changed everything. And from here you won't move the same way again. Now you understand. This wasn't random, it was reaching you all along. Subscribe and stay close. This path isn't meant to be walked asleep. You're not just watching this, you're becoming aware of who you really are.